Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this episode of Developing Classical Thinkers. My name is Winston Brady, and I'm the host of DCT. This podcast is a project of the faculty at Thales Academy. We're a network of private classical schools with campuses based mostly in Raleigh, North Carolina, but we also have campuses outside of Richmond, Virginia, Nashville, Tennessee, and Charlotte, North Carolina, with more campuses coming on board each year. Given that this podcast is a project of the teachers at Thales, a lot of times I bring in some of my favorite members of the faculty to come in our program, tell us about their background, why they got into teaching, and some of their joys and passions. On today's program, I'm joined by Mr. Marc Fusco, who teaches English and history at our Thales Academy Raleigh campus. Marc, thanks so much for being on the program today.
Thank you for the opportunity, Winston. It's good to see you.
Yeah, likewise.
Yes.
So, Marc, do you like my outfit?
I think it's a throwback. It's an homage to the control room of the old Apollo missions.
Yeah, that's right. So Marc is famous for wearing bow ties and just dressing to the nines during class each day. And I knew I couldn't beat you when it just came to style in class.
Sartorial splendor.
That's right.
Yeah.
And since you're a spokesman for NASA, I figured that I would bring, or I would wear, like the uniform that NASA engineers were wearing in the 1960s. If you look at those old photos of NASA engineers, they're always wearing a short-sleeved white dress shirt and a black tie.
Yes.
So, and I think that's an amazing uniform, and we really need to bring it back to Thales.
Agreed.
Can we do that?
I would love to. Yeah, I think it's super important. And once scientists figure out how to bring hair back to bald people, I'm gonna rock the NASA flat top crew cut.
Oh, I know. They all had crew cuts too, but not even that option is open to me at this point.
Yeah, it's really interesting because when you look at early NASA, it's a product of the John F. Kennedy New Frontier 1960s. Mm-hmm. By the end of the decade, culturally, the country is in a totally different place. Yeah. It's the 70s. So if you look at, say, the last several Apollo landings, 71, 72, they're wearing, wide Elvis collars. They're wearing, multicolored, just really loud and kind of tacky clothes. Hair's long, the sideburns have grown. So even the culture, horrifying. Even the culture in the NASA control rooms changed with the times.
And is that why we haven't been back to the moon in like decades?
Yeah. What happened is Richard Nixon, I actually wrote a book about this.
You wrote a book about this?
I have. I'll send you a copy.
As we're getting into this, Marc has an incredible background and is an amazing educator, and he can speak eloquently and passionately and authoritatively on a huge number of subjects. So, Richard, you wrote a book about Richard Nixon.
Yeah, my book was about the decision that here's the premise.
Yeah.
John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon meet in the election of 1960, right? The first televised presidential elections. And Richard Nixon loves space. John F. Kennedy hates space. He thinks it's a waste of money, and he's on record saying so. Kennedy wins the election. Even though he hates space, he gets put 3 months into his tenure as president, doesn't even have his sea legs yet. He is Yuri Gagarin, goes up into space, the first man in space, the USSR, our bitter enemies, and then the Bay of Pigs 4 or 5 days later. So he's in a pinch. They scramble, what can we do? We need to do something to get out ahead of the Soviets. And he sent Jim Webb, the NASA administrator, the second NASA administrator. He was brand new. He's a North Carolina native. He's from around Oxford. And Lyndon Johnson, who was in charge of the Space Council. You have 2 weeks to figure out what we can do. And they went and they polled everybody, and they thought that the Russians are going to be ahead of us until around 1968. So we say that you should go to the moon, because if we decide we're going to the moon, we would have to build an all-new rocket. The Russians would have to as well, so they would lose their heavy lift advantage and their boosters. Excuse me. But that would be the first thing that we're actually going to be able to do ahead of them. So keep in mind, Kennedy gets this message. We've only been in space for a total of 15 minutes, Alan Shepard. And we can't even get into orbit yet. And he goes on a joint a session of Congress, which typically you only do for the State of the Union message or to declare war, and he calls for, we're going to go to the moon. we go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they're easy, but
because they're hard. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
That's
it. Yeah.
I have that in our logic and rhetoric book. So
Yes.
classical rhetoric, that's one of the speeches, and the appeals that he makes to the nation's sense of honor
Yes.
and glory.
Yeah.
It's a great emotional
It's
appeal.
wonderful.
Yeah.
And it's,
Why climb the highest mountain?
why does Rice play Texas, right? Which is
really
a
funny.
hopeless football game at that point. Yeah, we choose to go to the moon. Yeah, so that was actually the Rice speech a little bit later. So he goes and he asks for all these things. He asks for a nuclear rocket. He's asking for communication satellites. But he says we're going to the moon by the end of the decade and safely return the man. That's the big problem, is bringing them back. We'd only been in space for 15 minutes, and he does this. So everybody at NASA starts in 1958. They're shooting rockets everywhere, but all of a sudden they have this, charter by the president to go to the moon. And the James Webb, who is the new NASA administrator, spent years as in the office of the budget for Harry Truman. He knows how to get it done. So he already has a blank check from Congress. And it costs about $40 billion in early 1960s money, which is serious money.
Yeah.
And Kennedy hated it every moment. During my research, I found out he was trying to back out of it over and over again. At one point, he was getting ready to propose a joint mission between the Soviet Union and the U.S. just to help defray the cost. It was going to be, now,
I'm glad we backed out of that one.
well, he was killed.
Yeah.
So he never got to,
Well.
yeah, he was murdered.
Oh,
so,
no.
yeah, and then once
What do
he
you
was
think-
murdered, huh?
What do you think is going to, actually, we shouldn't go down
That's
that road,
okay.
but they're going to release those files soon
Yes.
enough.
So when I was in college at Arizona State, I took a graduate seminar on presidential assassinations. You can imagine how interesting that is. And the first 7 weeks, it was, the 3 presidents who had been assassinated and all the other near assassination attempts.
Had
some of
Kennedy
which are-
been assassinated at that point?
he had been, yeah.
Okay.
But we spent the second 7 weeks talking about the Kennedy assassination. And Oswald definitely did it. There's no argument saying that he didn't do it. If you look at all the forensics, everything, there's an explanation for it. And I asked the professor, why do people, he was the world's expert on presidential assassinations, which is kind of a niche thing.
Yeah.
But when President Reagan was shot in 1981, this is the guy who was on all the news shows. And he said that the only reason why people think that it wasn't Kennedy is to sell books. So I think what you're going to find out, though, is that there was a big disinformation campaign after that. The Russians were afraid that they were going to be blamed for it. Oswald had ties to Russia. He had lived in Minsk for a couple of years, right? You're going to find out that the CIA was involved with Oswald. But I think he acted alone. I don't think certainly no second shooter. We'll see. It's going to be, there's a lot of embarrassing information in there. Otherwise they would have,
We're waiting with bated breath.
Yeah, so it could happen any day, and I'm frankly pretty excited about it.
So last year you taught literature,
I did.
6th, 7th, and 8th grade at our Raleigh campus. This year
I
you're
did.
teaching mostly history.
History.
6th, 7th, and 8th grade history.
Yes, and then grammar.
And grammar.
Yes.
6th grade or 7th grade?
6th grade.
6th grade. And so writing, grammar composition, like
Yes.
grammar rules,
Sure.
but your passion really is space, is it not?
Space and history.
History.
And literature. So I'm doing, when I was a boy, I wanted to be an astronaut, but I have asthma, so that was that. So I thought, when I grow up, I want to be a professor. I want to run a company, right? Be a business person, like an executive, and I want to work for NASA, and I've done all 3. So this job at Thales is kind of the icing on the cake. It's by far my favorite job I've ever had, and I have some pretty cool jobs.
Yeah.
It just, and I sound like a nerd, I love coming
No,
in
you
every
sound like
day.
someone who loves learning. And
That's exactly
what makes
it.
you such an effective
That's
teacher,
exactly
is
it.
that you can model to students what it's like
That's
to,
right.
to keep
And I get
pushing yourself
excited
and
about
learn
what I'm
something
talking
new.
about, like I'm getting all worked up.
Yeah. I just want to turn you loose.
Yeah. When I was a kid, my mom graduated high school. My father's first generation Italian. My grandfather immigrated from Italy.
Oh, che bello. Yeah, how wonderful.
Yeah, sure.
Dove in Italian? Where in Italy?
I don't speak Italian at all. No, just the bad words.
Okay.
That were bandied about by my father in anger. Yeah.
Okay. Where in Italy? Do you know where the old country is?
I've actually been there. I went there right after 9/11. It's in the Arch of the Boot.
Okay.
It's in Matera province, and it's the poorest part of Italy. It's in the mountains. It looks like Arizona. Nothing grows. It became socialist for a while after the war, but he left in 1920 after World War I. He fought on the Allied side. Italy was on the Allied side in 1920, or World War I, and he came over here. My grandmother was from the same town, Stigliano, in the mountains, and back then you would come to America and you would have a place to stay. So everybody who came from this town was living in the same apartment building. So they met there, they met here. And so my dad was one of 9 kids. He was the middle child. He wanted to be a history professor. He dropped out of school in 7th grade to support the family. So I'm the first person in my family to go to college, not even graduate college, which is pretty wild.
And your training is mostly English literature.
It is, yeah.
So
I have 2 degrees, and I'm ABD on a PhD in Renaissance and medieval.
Are you going to finish that?
No,
it's even for the fun of it all.
No, you have 10 years to finish it.
Okay, so it's up.
And a medieval PhD takes about 7 years because of all the languages. So I had to take Old English, Middle English, Old Norse, Old French, and Latin.
Oh,
it was delicious.
Can you read runes?
I can't read runes, but I can sight read Beowulf.
Okay. That's impressive.
And yeah, so I've taught classes. I just taught a class at NC State on Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, and that was all in Middle English. Mm-hmm. So I taught them a little bit of Middle English along the way. Middle English you can sight read. Yeah. It's close enough to modern English. Old English is German, and the structure is entirely different. And that's a really interesting story how that happens after the Battle of Hastings, but that's a subject for a different conversation.
Oh yeah, and the Great Vowel Shift. When I taught 10th grade literature, I would make my students memorize the prologue to the Canterbury Tales.
Yeah, and if you look at it, it's easier to read than if you hear it because of the Great Vowel Shift. So the vowels are pronounced differently. But when I was an academic, one of the projects I was working on is I found a monastery on the northern part of England, and there was one monk who was doing a history annal, and every year he would enter. We had a bumper crop this year. In the spring, the Vikings came. Yeah. We fought them valiantly for 5 days, and then the last sentence is, but the Vikings took the day, right? But
is this Lindisfarne? What's the name of the monastery?
I couldn't tell you now. It's
that one.
I have it written down at home.
Yeah.
But yeah. So what you can see in real time is the language breaking down and becoming Middle English. Like the same person writing every year, and a little bit of the structure, right? So Old English is inflected the way that German, Russian, Japanese, Latin, right? So where you're conjugating everything, not just the verbs, which is what you do in French and Spanish, right? You're only conjugating verbs. But in things like Latin and Old English, depending on the ending, you know whether it's an object or a subject or indirect object or whatever. And it's similar to Latin where in Latin, if you were a Latin orator, they would put the verb at the end of the sentence.
Creates a sense of anticipation, expectation.
And you don't know, what this person did something, it was done to this person with that, but not till the very end, You
figure out what actually happened.
Yeah, it's pretty wild stuff. Anyway, you could actually see in real time this breaking down over the course of 40 years, and at the end, he's writing full-blown Middle English. All that structure just dropped away. And one interesting fact about that, the peasants were everybody was speaking Old English, which is German. William the Conqueror wins, a very strange battle. It was actually 2 battles, but he comes in and he wins because they just got done fighting the Vikings up in the north.
Yeah, speaking of conspiracy theories and assassinations, like what Harold Godwinson, was he struck in the eye accidentally by an arrow, or was it a hit squad? I heard somebody messed with the Bayeux Tapestry.
To change that?
Yeah.
No, you don't do that. That's
you shouldn't
very
do
naughty.
That. But it's like the knitting
I think it was
equivalent.
just a lucky shot, personally.
Not a hit squad sent out by William the Conqueror.
No. What it changed, they were, the way the battle was going, it could have gone either way at that point. And, the king gets shot in the eye, pretty gruesome.
And that's kind of the day.
And they rallied, the English all panicked, and the Norman French came in and took over. So what you get is, and the Norman French replaced all the aristocrats, all the clergy, anybody who was educated Anybody who had any power, they killed and put their own people in. So you get the upper classes, right? The clergy, the top two estates, right? The aristocrats and the clergy speaking this new language, French. But the regular people are speaking Old English.
Mm-hmm.
And it bears proof today. So if you look at all the words in the English language,
Especially for food.
yeah, all the words in the English language, about 85% of them come from Latin or French. But if you look at usage, the words that people, the everyday words, husband, wife, all the bad words, obviously, that's all from Old English. And you mentioned the food. If you look at the people who prepared the food, right, so you have pig, which is Old English, cow, which is Old English, lamb or sheep, which is Old English, but the food that was produced, that was put on the plates of the gentry, right, you have pork, which is French, you have beef, which is certainly French, and you have mutton, which is French. The only thing that doesn't change...
Chicken.
That one That's
stays.
because everybody was eating chicken, right?
Both
sides. Yeah. So that's the example I use of, the differences in culture at that point. And that's when people go, the light goes on.
They had that funny SNL skit a few months ago, Nate Bargatze, like poking fun at the English language. But when you dive into the history, it makes so much sense. So
yeah, I haven't seen that.
Yeah. Well, I'll show it to you later.
Okay.
So, well, getting into, I heard you give this presentation a few weeks ago.
Okay.
But on the James Webb Space Telescope. So how did you get into NASA? Like out of all of this, how did you?
I'll tell you.
Yeah.
I was an academic for about 10 years or so. I left to start a company. And we started a company. Actually, it was a computerized medical record company. So if you ever go to Duke Healthcare or UNC Healthcare, that computer that they use, we made that. It was sold, it's changed hands several times, but that's the basis of what they use now. We were just doing it in the 1990s, so nobody was ready. After that, I became a management consultant in the pharmaceutical industry, which was really awesome. Flying first class, riding around in limos, it was their money.
Everyone should do that at least once.
Yeah, but then I had kids, so I couldn't live on the road anymore. And I just had a couple of businesses that I ran. And I was doing business consulting and some other stuff. And I realized that, hey, I could go, and I've been a NASA fan. I watched Neil Armstrong walk on the moon when I was 7. I've never recovered from that. It's amazing. And decided I was going to take my daughter down to, we actually went down to Disney, and someone said, Kennedy Space Center is like 45 minutes away. Let's go. So we went, and I think it was 127. It was towards the end of the shuttle program. And it was scrubbed 5 times. So we were there for 2 weeks in the summertime in Orlando on this hot slab at Kennedy Space Center. And we didn't get to see it take off. They were going to skip a day and then turn it around. So it was time to get back. So when I left, I was really sad. I thought I belong here. Similar to what happens when the first time I came to Thales. And when I got home, it was about 4 a.m. I thought, I need to work there. I'll drive the bus, I'll work at the snack bar. So I started looking for jobs at Kennedy Space Center. And a banner ad came up and it said, get a degree in space studies. I looked into it, and it's a multidisciplinary program, typically for people who are in NASA management, because they come in as engineers. This is orbital mechanics, planetary geology, planetary weather, all the good stuff, space policy. And I said, hey, I'm a literature guy. Is there a place for me, in this program? And at about 9:15 the next morning, I get an email from the chair said, we'd love to have you. And it was I could do it remotely. I just had to go up there 2 weeks, every semester.
I bet you loved going up there.
It was
2
the best.
weeks every semester.
It was incredible. Yeah, I got to work on the new Martian suit, space suit. I got to wear it. It's not designed for a 6'3" guy, and I made it fit. And I went there and I finished at the top of the class. All the other guys were already engineers and a lot of F-16 pilots, and there was one Canadian journalist. And it was great. It was the best.
Well, at that point, you're, liberal arts.
I was 50 years old, I
Yeah,
forgot to say.
But German, Old Norse, Old
Yeah.
English, Middle English,
Sure.
Latin, you certainly mastered really difficult subjects
Yes.
before entering into
Right, but it's
space
left brain,
studies.
right brain stuff at this point, right? But when I was in college, I could do left brain and right. I could do analytical stuff as well as the creative side. I have like a really weird brain for that. And then before I got out, that's where I wrote the book. So I was supposed to take a comprehensive exam.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, that's too easy. I'm going to write a book.
Mm-hmm.
So I wrote a book. And it was about 250 pages, and that's what we were talking about earlier.
With Nixon and Kennedy.
Yeah, about Nixon and Kennedy. And anyway, we got sidetracked. Nixon cancels the last 3 flights because it was too much of a risk. If you go back and look at every Apollo mission, there's 1 or 2 incidents where they almost all died, and he didn't want to take that risk. So he just said, all right, we did what we needed to do, and we never went back because there's no political will. And it's 2 things, political will, and you have to pay for it.
Yeah.
So we are going back now. There's going to be a flight next year circumnavigating the moon, but going the opposite way. And before we had to stay around the poles, now they're going to go to the South Pole because that's where all the water is. And what they're going to do is they're going to learn how to live off of the water, how to be a water farmer, kind of like
In the Martian.
Luke on,
Okay.
on
Oh,
Tatooine,
yeah.
right? They're moisture farmers. And then because it's in anticipation of going to Mars, on the moon, if something goes wrong, you're back in 4 days.
Yeah.
Right? If you're on the ISS, the space station, you're back in 45 minutes. Mars only lines up every 2 years with the Earth. So whatever happens, you can't come back. So they are perfecting the techniques to live on Mars, on the moon, which is kind of like our backyard as far as space goes. And then we'll be able to roll that out when we go to Mars. So, which is really interesting. So anyway, I get this degree, and NASA hires me, and I wind up also getting another job being a commercial space analyst. I mean, commercial space meaning SpaceX, Virgin Galactic, all the folks who, and there are about 100 companies doing business in space. Right now there's 2,500 companies making money in space, which is, it's amazing.
Operating satellites. And
Satellites.
Space tourism. Maybe
all
one
that.
day.
Yeah, everything in between. Launch vehicles, communications, satellites. It's, all the way up through building a giant power grid, getting it on the other side of the Earth's atmosphere, and microwaving the energy down. So they're working on that as well. It's so every year at the North Carolina Science Museum downtown, they have what's called Astronomy Days, which is a big space nerd festival. And they had 21,000 people last year there. Only Bugfest is, and I'm not going to Bugfest because that kind of creeps me out. They have bugs running around, tarantulas and all that, yeah. But I get to
I would avoid that one too.
Yeah, I usually do lectures where I talk about, I did one a couple weekends ago where I talked about, what human space flight, what happened in human space flight last year, and then what happened in commercial space, which there's a lot of overlap between the two, but I also do a talk about bad science in space movies. So that's kind of a funny thing. So,
and so your role really, you're an envoy for NASA.
I am.
You're kind of an ambassador for NASA.
I am a NASA ambassador, yes. So they have 10 people in every state. In states that have NASA centers, if you ask for a speaker, an astronaut will come.
You're on a short list.
Yes, sure.
That NASA
you
sends.
are like the cream of the crop as far as space nerds go. So I've been doing that for 13 years now. This is my 13th year. I've done over 1,000 talks for them. I was doing it full-time for a while. Well, not full-time, but I was splitting it with space consulting, which was glorious. And then this is an interesting story. One of the assignments I had was to go to a kindergarten classroom in North Raleigh every Friday for 4 months, because they had won a grant from Lego to build a moon base. So I go there, and it was great, I taught them, what you need, what they don't have in space, and it was really cool. But I met a family there, and I get a call, 3 years ago now. Hey, would you mind coming to Thales Academy in Raleigh? They're having a STEM day about space. would you be interested? So one of the mothers said, I know this guy, Mark. He'd probably be happy to come. And they called me, and I went there. I was just going to do a talk on Pluto. And when I got to campus, I was shocked, frankly. I'm a product of public school and public universities, most of which I had to pursue my own education, right? And all of a sudden, there's this dream school where everybody in middle school, you have to start taking Latin. And they're working off of the Trivium and the Quadrivium.
Which includes astronomy. Quadrivium includes astronomy. That's
one
of the 4 ways.
It does. And that's when the talk that you came to was for the Triangle Classical Forum, which is typically people are talking about classical educators and things. And I said, hey, it's one of the subjects of the
The original 7 liberal arts.
Yeah, and which goes back to the ancients, right? And it fit in perfectly. So anyway, go to Thales, and I'm shocked, and the kids were respectful. They were looking me in the eye and shaking my hand. I thought, this is a very, very unique place. And I stayed there all day. We launched some rockets. It was in the summertime, so I was really sweaty, and I thought, I need to work here. I felt compelled to work there. And I went and I asked for a job, and they said no. And they said, well, we don't have any openings right now. And I said, well, I have a background. I used to teach at Arizona State and Duke and UNC. And somebody sent me a listing, I think 3 months later, for a literature teacher. And I applied, and they said, you'll hear from us in 5 to 7 weeks. Someone called me the next morning at like 9:10.
It's really amazing how these things come together. If you're just.
I think it's fate.
Yeah.
To be honest.
And so fortuitous. And I love so many of the early stories from the space program. This story seems very similar to, say, Buzz Aldrin taking communion on the moon.
On the moon.
Right. Reading Genesis 1.
With a tiny chalice.
Yeah, with a very tiny chalice, and then keeping that a secret.
Wine. Oh yeah. They had a personal kit about that big that they can bring their own stuff, and a lot of people were bringing souvenirs that they could sell when they get back home. Yeah, rolls of dimes and things like that.
But so many of those early astronauts were, Christians. They were believers.
Very much
it seemed
so.
like.
Well, it was the 1960s, right?
Yeah,
America mostly.
But
was believed.
Yeah.
But like one form or fashion.
The height of scientific advancements. I mean, literally the height of scientific advancements. I mean, the moon.
Yeah.
Going hand in hand with reading Genesis 1 on Christmas Eve.
Christmas Eve in 1968.
Yeah, the Apollo 8 mission, right? Apollo 8.
Apollo 8 mission.
Okay.
Yep.
And Earthrise. So.
Yep. So they did that. They wound up getting sued by the atheists over it. So the astronauts got, and it wasn't planned. Mm-hmm. They kind of did it. The astronauts planned it, but NASA was not aware.
They wanted a text that spoke to as many people as possible on Earth.
Yeah, and it was the very beginning, how the universe was created. Mm-hmm. They started right there. And if you remember, 1968 was a very, very rough year. Martin Luther King's assassinated, Bobby Kennedy is assassinated, there's unrest in the street, there's all kind of racial animosity. And right at the end of the year, on Christmas Eve, we have this wonderful event that brings everybody together. And
sublime.
They saved 1968. It's an amazing story. So while they were doing that, I think it was the next day, they look out the window, and you can look at the transcripts. Take a look at this, and this is something nobody anticipated. So you see, they could see they were about 60 miles up, orbiting the moon, and they see the Earth rising the same way that the sun rises here. And with all these plans, they've been planning this mission for 10 years. Down to, 1/1000th of an inch tolerance on all these things, and nobody even, they were all locked down trying to get them there and
trying to get to the moon. They weren't thinking about what was behind them.
And they saw it, and Bill Anders, who was a junior member of the team, takes a photo of it, and they took a video of it. It gets published on the front. It's the Earthrise photo, and it gets published on the front page of the New York Times the very next day. And it changes the way everybody thinks about everything.
Yeah.
And what you see is, the way the astronauts describe it, there's this thing called the overview effect, where the astronauts, they come back different people. It's kind of like you graduate college and you go to Europe, and you come back a different person, right? You have more of a global view, and this is that on steroids. And they say that it's this fragile little ball with this tiny little atmosphere. It's a sliver out in the inky blackness of space, and you get this urge to protect it.
Yeah.
We've got to take care of this. The other thing that they noticed is if you look at every version of the Earth you've ever seen before that, it's a globe.
Yeah.
And you have all these political boundaries on it. But when you see the Earth, none of that's there.
Yeah.
And they think, we're all brothers.
Yeah.
We're on this spaceship together. We need to be good to each other. And every single person, without exception, comes back a different person. And they have a totally different viewpoint on things. And the people who were, who had faith, believers went there, come back. Charlie Duke from, I think it was Apollo 16, comes back. He's a minister even still. Ed Mitchell was kind of into parapsychology. He comes back, he's deeper into it, and he starts the Institute of Noetic Sciences. So just about everybody, and we're talking alpha males, engineers, right? They are just facts. Nobody is up there writing poetry, right? They're not really in touch with everything. They are numbers guys, and they all come back like that. Even Neil Armstrong came back a different person. There's a movie coming out about the overview effect, I think this year. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that. That would be something I would love to experience, going up into space, but we shall see.
Yeah, I mean, maybe SpaceX, space tourism.
It's $250,000 right now.
Sounds a little steep, but maybe
a 15-minute flight. You have 3 minutes of weightlessness. But if you have the money, what SpaceX's new rocket right now, it will hold 100 people at once. And it will reduce the cost of putting a pound. Right now, the cost of putting a pound into orbit is about $10,000. They thought the space shuttle was going to bring that down. The space shuttle made it $46,000. Now think about it. A gallon of water is almost 8 pounds. So it's $80,000 for every gallon of water we send up, which is why we're trying to get the water on the moon and on Mars. It's like having a convenience store, because you take the water, it's H2O, you electrolyze it, you have hydrogen, which is rocket fuel, oxygen is oxidizer. You can get home, but you can breathe the oxygen, or you can run a fuel cell. So you only have to take enough for the outbound trip.
It's fascinating to think about all the constraints that you have to operate under.
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah, especially going to Mars. It's a 9-month flight each way. There's no gravity, and you lose a very high percentage of your bone density every month that you stay in space.
Because of gravity, not affecting.
Because no gravity, yeah. Your body is designed for a 1G environment, and so what happens is, right now, most of your blood's pooling in your legs. When you go into space, it's equally distributed, and your body freaks out thinking there's way too much fluid. You start excreting everything, right? And you start excreting calcium. So it's equivalent. By the time you get to Mars, you're the equivalent of about a 90-year-old woman with osteoporosis. Mars's atmosphere is 100 times thinner than us. So there's no aerobraking. Parachutes have to be gigantic. So it's going to be people with very brittle bones and the roughest imaginable landing. And if you break something, you can't come back. So it's, now that's not the most, as far as NASA's concerned, that's not the most, it's not the biggest problem. The biggest problem is the psychological part. So if you put 4 old school 1960s macho NASA astronauts in the capsule, only one's coming back alive, right? They're going to kill each other. So they're looking at sending all female teams because they tend to work better in teams. Really, really interesting. And the big wild card is we've never not been able to see the Earth. So all you have to do is look down, right? If you're in an Antarctic station for 6 months, that's the closest analog. You still know that if something happens, the helicopters can come and rescue you.
Right.
And you're on the Earth. On the space station, you're not on the Earth, but you can look through the cupola and see the most beautiful view. So they don't know how we're going to react, because in the Martian sky, the Earth is a little star the way that
Mars looks to us.
Yeah, and if you tonight actually, all the planets, or 7 of the planets, are going to be lined up tonight. It's not going to happen until 2040 again.
This is a very fortuitous day for us to be
very
filming.
much.
So
outstanding. So hopefully this goes out before then.
Yeah.
Or you may have missed it. Yeah.
At the time of this recording, it's going on, but
Yeah.
you can still see, you can spot Venus
Sure.
pretty easily in the
Jupiter,
sky, Jupiter
and Mars
pretty easily
right
in the
now.
sky.
Yeah.
Telescope, you can see Saturn.
Sure.
Relatively low-powered telescopes, right?
Yeah, that's Galileo. Okay, so in 1609, the telescope was invented in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
And it's really cool because it was a lens maker. His rival invents the microscope.
Mm-hmm.
They're in a competition. He invents a telescope, but it's only used at sea.
Yeah, to
it's
spot
used
enemy
to see
ships.
farther away. So Galileo reads a scientific paper on it, and he builds his own, and already it's 20 times more powerful than the original one. And he takes it and he starts to look at the sky. And back in the day, the stars are fixed. We have the same constellations that the ancient Greeks had. There's some different names. But they noticed that there were some stars that moved over the course of the year. And they called them wanderers.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's
the
where we
Greek
get the
word
word
for wanderer is
planets. Yeah.
So that just means wandering star. So he goes to look at some of the wandering stars, and he looks at Jupiter. This is Galileo, and he sees that it's a world, right? And it also has its own satellites. He sees the 4 Galilean moons,
which automatically disproves Ptolemy.
Yep, and
Ptolemy argued that the Earth is at the center of the universe, the geocentric worldview, and so everything in the universe must revolve around the Earth. So
crystalline spheres,
the mere fact that he sees 4 moons operating another body.
He knows that Copernicus is right.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next night he looks at Saturn, and it looks like it has coffee cup handles. So it's not perfect.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on? Then he looked at the moon. It's got mountains, and it looks like it has oceans, the mare, right? Which is just dried up volcanic lava.
Mm-hmm. And of course, you got the best vocab word for the surface of the moon, the Terminator.
Yes, the Terminator. Yes, it's also the Twilight Zone, they call it. It's to me, if I could go back in time, obviously, you would want to go to various other historic events, but being there when he sees that for the first time, and he's the only person in history who's ever seen that, and talk about mind-blowing.
And I love Galileo too, because what he's doing is not that difficult to replicate. I mean, it is, but he's staying up late.
Oh yeah.
He's looking at the moon.
His health is suffering.
Jupiter. Yeah. He's got, certainly he's got like the most advanced telescope
Yes.
available to him.
Sure.
But a lot of the habits that Galileo demonstrated are really replicable or imitatable for students today.
Just good habits in general. Just having
Patience,
that level
rigor.
of curiosity.
Yeah.
That to me, I'm curious about everything. I think the big tragedy of life is that you can't learn everything.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we've ever talked about this. I try to learn one new skill every year.
And how does that benefit you?
I'm in a band now. I learned how to play the drums 3 years ago. So I'm in a band. This year I'm trying to learn how to be a great history teacher.
Mm-hmm.
This is the first time I've ever taught history. I tried playing golf a couple of years back during COVID. That didn't go so well.
What's the name of the band? Can I guess it?
I can't tell you.
The Grey Havens.
Yeah. No, it's for a while it was, how the AC/DC logo is? Mm-hmm. It was OBCD, obesity.
Okay.
Yeah. But then the heavier guys in the band didn't like that so much. They thought they were being called out. So I don't even tell my students because I don't want them showing up.
We'll edit this out, maybe.
Yeah, we could talk about it later.
So the James Webb Space Telescope, how is this, just high-level overview,
Sure.
How is it able to get such beautiful photos, such amazingly beautiful photos?
Sure. Yeah, the thing of the James Webb, one of the things that it has is the mirror. We all know the Hubble telescope. Mm-hmm. It was launched in the early 90s.
And the James Webb telescope was launched in what year?
2022.
2022.
It went operational in 2022. I think it was launched in 2021.
And it's the mirrors, and what other
it's
sort
the
of
mirrors.
instruments that it has that?
So Hubble has a 43 square foot mirror,
Mm-hmm.
which is gigantic.
Where is the Hubble telescope? Is it in California,
No,
Texas,
it's in space.
Hawaii? Oh, it's in space. Okay.
Yeah, it's about 450 miles.
Pardon
up.
my ignorance.
No, it's okay. Yeah, okay, we could take a step back. Remind me to come back to what we're talking about.
Yeah.
NASA, one of the things that the atmosphere does is it, it has a 43 square foot mirror, which is gigantic. So Hubble has a 43 square foot mirror, which is gigantic. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, okay, we could take a step back. Remind me to come back to what we're talking about. NASA, one of the things that the atmosphere does is it filters out a lot of electromagnetic radiation,
Yeah.
which is really fortunate.
For life.
Oh, yeah. So we don't get X-rays. That is filtered out for the most part. Gamma rays certainly are filtered out. Most of ultraviolet radiation is filtered out, but there's still part of the band that gets through, which is why you get sunburned,
mm-hmm.
right? You have to wear sunblock. FM, the FM radio, TV waves, FM waves, cell phone waves they're not blocked. They go out into space. So right now, after the first TV broadcast in 1936, the opening of the 1936 Olympics, a speech by Adolf Hitler, is at the forefront of this communications bubble that's traveling at the speed of light in all directions. So he's going to be the first person that people on other planets will know that lived on Earth.
There's something really tragic and ironic about that.
It's bizarre.
Isn't there?
Yeah, it's crazy. Anyway, AM radio doesn't go through, and that's why AM bounces off the ionosphere. That's why, interesting story, the St. Louis Cardinals in the 1930s and 40s was America's team, because there were no teams west of the Mississippi, but they had a pretty powerful AM radio broadcast transmission tower, and it would bounce off the clouds, and just about everywhere in the country you could listen to it. It's kind of like what happened with the Atlanta Braves when they went on. Everybody got them for free on cable, in the 90s, and they became America's team. So that St. Louis Cardinals were the team that people who didn't have a team, you could get the game every night, and you did it. And that's because of the way the atmosphere is. So if we want to study gamma rays, if we want to study things in the infrared spectrum, for example, if we want to study in the X-ray spectrum, which we do, or in the visible spectrum, as in the case of Hubble, because the Earth, our atmosphere shimmers and it ruins, you don't get all the data that you would normally get. It's called seeing. The seeing is really bad. So they decided they're going to put 4 of these they call them the great observatories in outer space. So we get the Compton Gamma Ray Observatory. We get the Chandra X-ray Observatory. We get the Spitzer Ultraviolet Observatory, which was retired in 2020, I believe. And then we had Hubble. And they've basically revolutionized astronomy. The problem with Hubble is it sees in the visible spectrum the same, narrow bandwidth that your eyes see in. But there's a lot more going on in space, right? Stars are kicking out X-rays and gamma rays and all this other stuff. They retire Spitzer, and they decide we're going to have the next generation. It was called the Next Generation Space Telescope, NGST, and they start planning it in the 80s. And they decide on not having it look in the visible spectrum, having it look in the infrared spectrum. And here's why. When you're looking out at space, you're looking back in time. The speed of light is finite, right? Nothing with any mass can go faster. Light's pure energy. So that's the speed limit. 186,000 miles per second, I think. Something like that. It's pretty fast.
Yeah.
It's not instantaneous, but it's fast. Well, when we're talking about these distances, like the Milky Way galaxy is 100,000 light years across. So for a photon of light to get from one end to the other, 100,000 years. That's really, really big. If you look at the Big Bang, right, everything was in, what they call the singularity, and then in a fraction of a second, all the matter in the universe inflates, and then it explodes, and everything's off in its own direction.
And a theory largely developed by a Belgian Catholic priest,
yes.
George Lamarck.
Well, it's amazing because the Vatican has a great observatory. Mm-hmm. They want to find out things the same way that NASA does, but with the Vatican, they're getting a better understanding of God's creation.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, studying the book of nature,
yes,
studying the...
Exactly.
And it does,
which is very, very Renaissance, right?
Yeah.
It's really, really cool.
Kind of like at the end of Job, when God speaks to Job and reminds him of his power and direction of all of the created order.
Yeah.
Like, who binds the Pleiades?
Sure. And what I tell people is, if you look at the account that a scientist will give you of the Big Bang, right? There was nothing, and all of a sudden there's everything.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at that same account in Genesis, fiat lux, boom.
Let there be light.
And if you were an observer for both of those, it would look exactly the same. So what science can tell us is what happened, but not necessarily why it happened. Or, there's no prime mover, right? They don't know if there was that was the beginning of time, or is this something that's been going on forever in a cycle, right? They have no idea. Depending on who you talk to, they have different theories. So I don't think that, I think that faith has a place in science.
Yeah, those conclusions.
They're not
that
mutually,
you can't,
exclusive.
Yeah, that you can't reach or discover by empirical observation.
Sure, yeah. I mean, you can't prove or disprove the existence of God using the empiricism, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean, look, that the William Röntgen, who discovered X-rays, one day he just discovered them.
It was an accident.
Yeah, they were there
Yeah.
a week earlier. He just didn't know they were there. So they existed. It just, we don't have a way to detect everything. And that's how science works. You got to see it, and it has to be reproducible by everybody. So it's a great method, but it's not the answer to everything.
Well, and speaking of some of these photos here, so I'm pulling up, and we'll show this on the screen, but on one side, we have a photo taken by the Hubble Space Telescope, which is astoundingly beautiful. And this is the cosmic cliffs of Carina Nebula.
Yeah.
On the other side, James Webb Space Telescope. But there's a huge amount of stuff that you can see
through
from on the James Webb Telescope. I mean, what is that? I mean, there's like an entire other layer.
Yeah, what it is one of the things that why James Webb is looking at the ultraviolet, things are accelerating, which is really weird. The Big Bang, the farther things are away from us, the faster they're going. So energy somehow is being added into the mix, and that's when they talk about dark energy. When things accelerate, they shift. We get the Doppler effect, right? You hear it when you hear a train come by, or a car, or an ambulance especially, right? The pitch changes. When it's coming towards you, the sound is being compressed, and when it goes away, it's being stretched. So it's a different pitch. It's the same with light.
Yeah, the Doppler redshift. So
redshift.
Yeah, as it's moving away, it's getting it's decreasing in energy,
but it's going so fast that it's redshifted out of the visible spectrum. So Hubble could only see up to about 400 million years after the Big Bang. And what they wanted was a telescope that could see almost back to the beginning of time, right, 130 million years after the Big Bang.
Yeah, and is that just as you point the telescope towards like the center of the created universe, the light there isn't really moving, right? Because the light's
coming back. Yeah, it's coming back, but it's being stretched, right? Because we're moving away from it, and it's moving away. So it's the same thing like when you hear a train go by. That the change in pitch in the sound is analogous to what's going on with it being redshifted.
And so the material, say at like the edge of the created universe, that's the newest stuff. But if we can point.
Well, no, it's the farther stuff is away from us, the older it is, and the more it's in the infrared.
Okay.
So a visible spectrum telescope is only going to get you so far. So they made, because I remember reading that they were going to make the James Webb in the infrared. I thought, why would you do that? And now I understand.
Right.
So you'll be able to see farther away, right, which means farther back in time by definition. You can see through dust clouds. Right, you can cut through that, which is why you pointed out the photo of the Carina Nebula. If you look at the Hubble version, you can't really see through it. But if you look at the same picture to the right from James Webb, you can see things coming through. And those things coming through are not stars, they're galaxies.
Okay.
Right, and also, I mean, the picture looks a little more three-dimensional, right? If you go to the next slide, that's amazing.
And the close-up here of the cosmic cliffs of Nebula.
Yeah, nebula is a gas cloud. What that means is that a star went through its life cycle, exploded into a supernova, and that's just the gas and the matter and everything. And what we have here, the blue area, is a bubble. So this is they just took part of this. If you could look at it, the blue area would be a big circle. And what that is a star lighting off, a new star being born, the shock wave moves everything out.
Okay.
That's what that is.
How does that work?
So it's like a wave.
Yeah.
Well, it's just what it is. It's a thermonuclear explosion. It's an hydrogen bomb because it's the same process. It's fusion. That's moving everything. So think of the bombs that we have, and I think the largest one Russia built was 50 megatons, right? The Tsar Bomba. This dwarfs that. It's a star, right? So instead of a mass of plutonium this big, you have a star that is a million times bigger than the Earth, right? So imagine with the explosion how it would scale up. So what it did is it blew all the smoke and all the dust and the debris away, and that's why we have this blue area.
Okay.
And if you look at the blue area, you can see what's beyond it. And in the photo, the way that Hubble works, because it has 6 mirrors, right? And it's probably, I can tell you how much bigger it is. So Hubble's mirror is about 43 square feet. James Webb's is 273 square feet. So that's like having a retina in your eye, 273 square feet wide, or in
so even this
area.
photo, this has got to be, like 200. Like how
what
big
it
is
doesn't
the
do
amount of
is
space?
it does not magnify it, but it can see fainter objects.
Yeah.
So it's like you have when the photons hit your retina, right? You have rods and cones there, and your brain puts the picture together. This is like if you had an eye that was almost 300 feet in area.
That's crazy.
What you would be able to see at night, and so it can see farther, more distant objects. Plus, it can see in the beyond things that you can't see because again, really far away stars are really older, right? That connection with the speed of light has shifted out of the visible spectrum.
Okay.
So whoever figured this out is brilliant, and because literally every single photo that comes back or every piece of data that comes back changes the way that we understand it. They have to go back to the drawing board.
Yeah.
And if you are an astronomer or an astrophysicist who studies early galaxy formation, this is it. We never really understood. They only knew that we were in a galaxy. They discovered that around 1920.
Right, that our solar system is a small part of a galaxy, of which there are a near infinite number of galaxies. Have we counted the sheer number of galaxies?
We used to think that, and that's a good point. Let's go to the previous slide.
But back on this one here, so the orange area, that's the nebula. That's an exploded
gas.
That's the gas from an exploded star.
And what that'll do, from an exploded star, that's how
but then that gives birth to other stars.
Well, what it does is, in the absence of a gravitational pull, like it's 9.8 meters per second is our per second squared is the Earth's gravity. So it's pulling you down at that rate. It's by far the strongest force acting on your body, right? You couldn't jump high enough to get out of the Earth's orbit.
Yeah.
If you were in orbit, right, microgravity, attraction between two atoms would pull them together, right? In the absence of this huge force pulling us down, our two laptops would pull each other together. So what you get in this huge cloud is all these atoms. It's typically hydrogen, although since it's from a supernova, it's every element on the periodic table gets pulled together and it makes what's called planetesimals, right? And then they get bigger and bigger, and they become planets. And the gas cloud is usually moving in a certain direction. So the gas cloud from which our solar system originated is moving. Imagine like a record player or a plane spinning around. That's why all the planets go in the same orbit. They're all on the same plane except for Pluto, which is 17 degrees off. But that's a different story altogether. It's coming back. They were getting ready to vote it back, but then COVID came.
Okay. That's good to know. I'm
Yeah,
glad.
it's great.
You know, those were good days when Pluto was a planet.
It was. It's and that's we can talk about that next if you like.
Well, we were going to talk about the galaxies. How many galaxies there are?
Yeah.
You're going to show me another photo.
Yeah. So go to the previous photo. That one.
Galaxy Cluster SMACS.
Right. So
and what does that stand for? SMACS.
Southern Massive Cluster Survey.
Okay.
So it's a galactic cluster. A galaxy cluster is the way that stars, the stars have a supermassive black hole at the center of every galaxy. And that holds everything in place, right? We're out in the boondocks. I think we're on the Orion Arm, out in the middle of nowhere. If we were towards the center of the galaxy, there's too much radiation for life to start. But a galaxy is just a grouping of stars, typically 200 billion stars per galaxy. So what they did with Hubble is they pointed it at the darkest part of the sky. It's a grain of rice or a grain of sand-sized part of the sky where we couldn't detect anything. And on the previous slide, you can see, Hubble saw a lot of stuff. So that took 10 days, as a time exposure, because it was just so, it wasn't very, 43 square feet versus 270 plus, right? So it's not going to be able to detect the same faint signals. So when James Webb goes online, they point it at the same place, the darkest part of the sky, there's nothing there. And we get this photo.
Right.
Okay. Now, in that photo, there's not supposed to be anything because it's an empty void in space. But if you look at it, every object that has 6 spikes, because it's got 6 mirrors on the telescope, it makes that artifact if it's a star. So it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4 stars. The rest of them are galaxies. So they freaked out when they saw this. So they originally thought there's 200 billion galaxies, each with 200 billion stars. When they saw this, there's 1 trillion galaxies with 200 billion stars, most of which will have a planet that is in what we call the Goldilocks zone, where you have liquid water, right? So between 32 degrees and 212 degrees Fahrenheit. And we believe that everywhere that there is liquid water and an energy source, you're going to find life. 20 years ago, we thought it was a rare event. So now we think there's life on Pluto. We think there's life on Europa, which is a moon of Jupiter.
One of the Galilean moons.
One of the Galilean moons.
We think there could be.
Do
you think there's life on other planets?
I would guarantee it. I mean, short of finding it, right? But I would, if I were a betting man, I would bet the house on it. Just because one of the things I got to do at NC State was teach a class on astrobiology, which is how life originated, right? So all the factors are in place. And most of it comes down to the liquid water and a source of energy. So we know Pluto looks like a snowball, but it's got a subsurface ocean with more water than we have on the Earth, right? It's about 50 miles deep there. On Earth, the deepest point, Marianas Trench, is about 8 miles deep, right? Most of it's pretty shallow. So we think that there is probably life, certainly not intelligent life.
Complex technological life.
Yeah. If you look at all the species that were, billions of species that came and went or are still around now, you could argue maybe 5 or 6 were intelligent. And out of all those 5 or 6, we're the only ones who can manipulate stuff. Like a whale may be smart enough to do math, right? But it's got, it can't build stuff. Dolphins, that kind of thing. So it's for it to get, will take billions of years to get to that point. And because the universe is 14.7 or whatever it is, billion years old, it may not have had time to develop intelligent life elsewhere. Because if you look at life here, we've had 6 total extinction or near extinction events, and every time life comes roaring back. And anyway, the other thing is, people ask me, I go to a party, I hear, we never landed on the moon. Yeah, it's idiotic. And I show them photos of where the footprints are and where they left their stuff, and all those sites. It's been mapped by Russia, by India, by Japan. They would know if it wasn't real. And then the other one is, NASA's really hiding aliens. And if NASA were hiding it, NASA's budget has been about $30 billion for about the last 30 years. So it's regressing, right? Not keeping up with inflation. If there was any hint that there was life out there, they would trumpet it because their budget would instantly go up, 1,000%. There was in the late 90s, I think 97-ish, 98, a person, what was his name? I can't think of his name now. A scientist at the University of Arizona. Hopefully think of his name. He took a meteorite that we knew was from Mars because of its composition. Right there, we have meteorites from Mars. We have them from the moon. Just because Mars got impacted and the top got knocked off of it, so some of it came here. He was the first guy to cut it open, and he cut it open and he found what looked like bacteria or fossilized bacteria. So he writes a paper, he presents it at an astronomical or astrophysical convention, whatever it is, a scientific meeting on Thursday. He gets a call Friday morning, be in the White House on Monday morning. You're going to make an announcement in the Rose Garden with President Clinton. So he shows up, President Clinton says, "We found life on Mars." Just like that. Turns out it's microscopic. It's too small even for the bacteria here. So it's about 60% believe it's not, 40% people believe that it is life. So NASA would not hide something like that. They don't have enough money to do what they need to do. Right? The military space budget is twice what NASA gets. The civil space budget. Really interesting stuff.
Yeah, it's fascinating to think about. Those sorts of hypothetical scenarios and what's out there. I mean, all of that is so fascinating. Just the hypothetical scenarios as to what's out there. I think life on Earth, unique. I don't really know. It's right now the whole conversation is just boggling my mind.
Yeah, it is. And before we go, I want to share something else. Oh, well, we already talked about that maybe. But yeah.
Well, why don't we go to another photo from the James Webb Space Telescope? Do you have a personal favorite that you want to share to us?
Let's look at the Pillars of Creation. The Pillars of Creation was based probably the flagship photo from Hubble. Yeah. That's the one that everybody knows. And what we were told is that was a star nursery, right? It's part of the Eagle Nebula.
What is a star nursery?
It's where stars are born, where they're made, just like a human nursery.
I love the personification in describing stars as if they're like people.
Well,
the life cycle of stars.
Yeah, it's just a metaphor, right? Yeah, to help you understand what's going on. Life cycle, Our sun right now is middle-aged, right? It's halfway through. So the Pillars of Creation, if you look at the picture on the left.
That's from Hubble.
That's from Hubble, correct. You can't see through the clouds. It almost looks like fingers, right? But we knew that the scientists knew that was a star nursery.
And is that inside where, so if you've got this hand coming up,
right?
You've got what looks to be like a palm with fingers coming up, and then there's a blank space in which you can see.
You can see through it. Yeah,
you can see through it, and then it looks like
just a bubble. Yeah.
Okay.
It could be a star lit off and blew the shock wave blew a hole in the cloud.
Okay.
But what this is
that the nursery though? Is that the nursery where the stars are born? Or is that
the nursery is even better.
Okay.
So if you look at the picture on the right, that's what it looks like from James Webb, and it looks more three-dimensional. You can see through the dust cloud. You can see, and again, most of those are galaxies that you're seeing through it. If we go to the next slide, which is a close-up of this, you can see that there are red areas.
You can see the tips, almost like fingernails.
Fingertips,
yeah.
Yep. What those are, this is pretty wild, those are shock waves from newly formed stars. So that is the first star lit off. It's 2 seconds old or however, it's brand new, right? It's not even home from the hospital yet. That's the shock wave. So those are the cries of the newborn stars in the nursery. So you are seeing stars coming to life for the first time ever. And this, to me, I mean, aside from the mind-boggling, what we call the deep field photo, of all the galaxies from the tiny blackest part of the sky, to me, this is the most miraculous, because you're seeing the stellar life cycle in action. It's wild. So the people who are against this whole thing cost $10 billion. It started out, it was supposed to be $1 billion, but you know how that works. $10 billion and about $1 billion a year to operate. It's already changed the way that we understand both the early universe and galaxy formation and star formation. They've had to literally rewrite the book on that. And every piece of data that comes back that's available to the public, everything that NASA has, once they publish it, everybody has access to it, right? Just go to the website. But it's changing. These are, if you talk about the golden days of astronomy, these are they, right?
It's what we're living in now.
Yeah, and it's, I'm happy to be alive right now. We got to see the early days, even in the actual putting people into space, the things that are going on now. Elon Musk had almost 140 launches last year. One company. When I was in space school 13 years ago, my professor told me we will never have more than 60 or 65 launches worldwide, ever. One company did that, right? They think they're going to hit 200 this year. Launches into orbit. And I think we started talking about this earlier. SpaceX is building this new Starship that's 100% reusable.
Yeah.
So we started talking about it's about $10,000 to put a pound in orbit. It's going to be about $200 to put a pound in orbit.
Yeah, and just keep going.
So you and I could pool our money and take my cell phone and build a CubeSat out of it and get it launched for like $1,000. We could have our own satellite.
Yeah.
That's real. I mean, there are engineering classes in colleges that have their own satellites now.
I remember in high school there was a club called CanSat.
Okay.
And the students, they were taking aluminum cans and configuring them into satellites that could somehow or another survive in orbit.
Yeah, the thing now, if you look at a cell phone, it's a computer. They're easy to program, right? It'll hold, they've, excuse me, the new phones can hold an awful lot of data. They have a communications built in, so it's got the whole satellite bus. You just got to harden it to protect it against the radiation in space, which is relatively easy to do. So you have everything you need. You just attach sensors to it. It's beautiful. These are the days. Yeah, I used to think, the 60s and the early 70s, we were doing things. But Elon Musk, that new rocket that's going to bring the cost down, will also hold 100 people at once.
Yeah.
And it's designed to colonize Mars. They don't even have to modify it. It runs on methane. It'll have machines in there that'll pull the methane out of the Martian atmosphere and refuel itself. Yeah, it's real. And they're flying the 8th mission, the 8th test flight in 2 days. And the other ones are glorious. It's 400 feet tall. It's bigger than the Saturn V moon rocket.
Yeah, it's incredible.
It's got 33 engines. Like the Saturn V had 5 engines on the first stage. And if you were 6 miles away, which is the closest you're allowed to get, back in the day when people carried money in their pockets, if you had change in your pockets, when it launched, the change would start jingling. And you could feel your intestines moving around. This rocket is way more powerful. It's way louder. It's awesome. It's 100 people at once with staterooms, with cabins, just like, and it lands on its tail.
Yeah.
The way that things were supposed to land, according to the 1950s. It's these are the glorious times for space exploration. So I think I'm 63.
You don't have to admit to anything.
I have about 25 years left ish. We will like NASA is about 30 years away from going to Mars since the 1980s. Elon Musk, every even numbered year, the 2 planets, Earth and Mars, line up. The next time, in 2 years from now, he's going to start sending infrastructure up to Mars so that maybe in 4 or 6 or 8 years he can start colonizing it. So he's leaving NASA in the dust. NASA's paying him for rides. It's what SpaceX is doing is it defied everything I learned in school. Yeah.
I love the videos of the SpaceX rockets just gently, going back to Earth, being caught like on, almost looks like on toothpicks,
Yeah. Oh, you're
Save
talking
the
about
booster.
on the, that's the big booster.
Yeah.
That
It's
booster
incredible.
is like a 24-story building.
Yeah. And safely landing that and reusing it.
Yeah, and that's just the booster, right? The other part is where the people are going to be, and it's all it's the different. Here's a good analogy. Say you and I decide we're going to go down to Florida, right? But you only use planes once per flight, right? So we have it seats 250 people, $250 million for a plane. So a ticket would be $1 million each way. Up until SpaceX, that's how rockets operated. The first stage of every rocket, American rocket, is on the floor of the Atlantic Ocean, right? He's bringing the first stage around, bringing it back, and landing it, which is, it's mind-boggling.
It's insane.
And he's doing it because it's a company, and it's got 9 engines. Engines are by far the most expensive part. So when he started out, the other American company that could put stuff in space was charging upwards of $300 to $350 million a launch. Right now he's charging $42 million a launch, and the price is coming down. That's what Falcon 9 is. I watch every launch. If we have school, I put it up in my classroom because the kids need to see this. And my students are really lucky. I've lived a charmed life, seen a lot of really cool things, but they're going to actually get to do it. And I tell them, if you do your homework and you listen to your parents and listen to your teachers and you study math or science, you could have a job where you would work in space, on a space station or on another planet. How awesome would that be? If you want to. Both of my daughters are too afraid to do that. They're too risk averse. I would do it. If I could go to Mars, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. I would go in a heartbeat. But these are the times in which we live. And no other company can bring a first stage back and land it. It's put everybody else out of business.
Who knows what our students are going to do?
They're going to do great things. They are brilliant. It's working at Thales with these kids. You hear horror stories about middle school, right? It's been one of the great pleasures of my life working with these kids. And when we track out, the first week I'll say, man, I'm glad to be away from them. And then I'd say, but I miss this one particular kid, or I miss them. And then at the end of the second week, I want to come back. So I'm ready to come back a week early. And I think that's the way that most of the people who are involved with Thales, it's a labor of love. I could be doing a lot of other things, but this is what I choose to do. And I go to work every day happy. So, yeah, it's the best.
Well, we're privileged to have you on staff.
Thanks.
Is there anything that we haven't talked about today that we should cover? I mean, there's more photos in the James Webb Telescope. We'll have to post more of these online.
I think people would be interested in hearing about Thales in particular. It's just a great place to be. The fact that we are providing this education that was being provided for 1,000 years or 2,000 years or more.
This is what Galileo got.
Yes.
Right? This
what
is
Shakespeare
what Copernicus got.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and it's it all got changed with John Dewey when they reformed the education system. He's trying to make good little factory workers.
Yeah.
What we need are Renaissance men and women, people who have a broad, like my brother. I have a brother's 4 years younger. He's a PhD in microbiology. He has drilled down.
Yeah.
Right. He worked on with the COVID vaccine. So he does this tiny little niche thing where I am broad.
Right.
Right.
And you can learn anything. That's what being a liberal artist means, that you're free to learn just about any subject that comes across your gaze.
I started playing a computer game about the Civil War, and I was never really interested in it. And it covers the Battle of Antietam. I became obsessed with it. I read like 30 books in 1 year on the Civil War, okay? And that was 2 years ago. I've been to Gettysburg 5 times since then, been to Antietam 6 times, so I'm obsessed with it. So I can't wait. My students are in for a treat when we do the Civil War.
Yeah, I went just a few months ago. I went over Thanksgiving.
Which one? Which
Antietam.
Antietam's amazing.
Yeah, my parents live up in the Northern Virginia area.
Okay.
So We took a very quick day trip.
And they have the new
Thanksgiving Day.
visitor center there, which is pretty amazing. So I was there when it was closed, but just
Me too, because
So
it was
I-
Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
But like the battlefield is insanely
It's
well
ma-
preserved.
yeah, and it's got a lot of
beautiful.
really
the Dunker
well-known-
Church is
the Dunker
there.
Church, yeah,
the
the-
Bloody Lane.
Bloody Lane, Miller's Cornfield. Yeah, it's all the stuff that you read about. And when you think about it, it's one of the first battles that the North won, even though it was probably a stalemate. But because of that, it enabled
Yeah,
Lincoln
the
to issue
Emancipation
the Emancipation Proclamation, and which is brilliant. I mean, aside from what it did for us socially, right? England and France are ready to recognize the South,
But they couldn't.
But they couldn't because there was aside from Mexico, they were the first two countries to ban slavery, and for the South, it was always about slavery. If you look at the Articles of Secession, it mentions slavery in all of them. North Carolina, it's kind of hinted at.
Well, in the some of the upper-ranking members of the Confederacy, like Alexander Stephens in his
Yeah.
cornerstone speech, where
If
he
you
like,
read
lays
that,
out,
it's
yeah,
scurrilous. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's horrible.
the individual. I might draw like a line of between some of like the soldiers, right?
Oh
for
yeah,
whom
yeah, they,
not
no,
like,
they're fighting for
hearth and home.
Yeah, they think they're invaded, right?
Yeah.
I can understand that, but Lincoln decides, he doesn't, slavery. Even though he's an abolitionist, right? He promises that he's not going to outlaw slavery, right? He's maybe curtail new slave states, something like that. But he has a chance. He wants to head off Britain coming in. If Britain comes in, England comes in, or Great Britain comes in, they're going to make us sue for peace, and you're going to have two countries, and slavery, will eventually die out. But think about the lives of those people,
Yeah.
right? The individuals. And to me, that's one of the most brilliant political calculations, is he comes out and he makes this proclamation, and which is real weird because it's only the territories under rebellion,
not the border
Maryland
states.
or Delaware, which are in the north, but
Politically
they're slave states.
advantageous.
Yeah, and he does that, and it changes the casus belli, right? The reason why we're fighting for slavery, because originally it was to keep the Union together.
Yeah, maybe free
And it
navigation
changes
of the
everything.
Mississippi.
So they back off. I think Lord Palmerston had actually scheduled a vote, or at least a debate in Parliament, and he had to back off. I mean, brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. And the rest is history. I love history.
yeah.
I love literature.
Well, just anything,
Yeah,
just
it's all good. And
like
it's,
any sort of exhilarating story, whether it's written by Shakespeare, or it's written in the chronicles of great heroes long
Yeah.
since past, or frankly, up in the heavens.
Yeah, and the thing about Shakespeare is, if you look at what the other stuff that was going on, cycle plays and things like that, they're like puppet shows, the level of drama. And Shakespeare comes along, and Christopher Marlowe parallels him. I'm teaching a class on Shakespeare and Marlowe.
I love Dr. Faust. That's the best.
Next semester at NC State. But they're writing psychologically complex characters that are flawed, just like I am, just like you are. No offense.
No taken.
Yeah. And they're just like us. And I think if you have a character that Superman, he always does the right thing.
Yeah.
What do you learn from that?
That's why nobody likes Superman. I don't mean to end the
Oh,
show on
yeah.
such a dour note, but it's true.
Batman
like
is the
people
guy.
want characters
Yeah.
that they can identify with, and they can identify with them if they have
And
real struggles and problems.
Yeah, and
Like
that's
Spider-Man. I like
Spider-Man
Spider-Man.
especially. Yeah,
Spider-Man's a good one.
Almost all the Marvel universe is broken in one way or another. They were a counterculture
Yeah.
group, but Batman, he's like you, he's like me, he's a lot richer, and he's really smart, but he's a regular guy
For the most
doing
part,
superhero
yeah.
things. Yeah, it's but Shakespeare. You could read Julius Caesar, right? You could learn lessons from that will help you. It's why we study history. It's why we study literature. It's to learn things about the human condition and to help give us, not ammunition, but help give us knowledge that will help us make the right decisions, right? Because every human goes through the same thing. When you're a teenager, your parents are telling you what to do, and you're thinking, oh, what do you know?
Yeah.
They were just like you in the same situation, right?
Some funny anecdotes, but Napoleon Bonaparte, Andrew Roberts mentions this in his biography of Napoleon, that maybe before the Battle of Waterloo, he didn't get any sleep.
Okay.
And so some of his sluggish decisions, his inability to dislodge the Scottish troops from that farmhouse in Waterloo held by the Duke of Wellington and so on, like maybe some of the problems that Napoleon experienced because he didn't get a good night's sleep.
Yeah.
So and those are simple things that kids, like, that's a good lesson to tell a student, like, hey, you should really strive to get that 8 hours that you need.
The guy who almost conquered the world was human. He had to sleep, right? And you can't get around that. You have to take care of your body. It's fascinating.
Yeah, even better, though, is his upbringing, because he loves history. He loves biographies of Alexander the Great and great conquerors from the Greeks and the Romans, but he also loves mathematics.
Yes.
And in his military career, he's able to bring those two arts together.
Yeah. You make a great artillery officer if you can do math on the fly, right?
That's calculus.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's pretty amazing stuff.
Well, what do you think? Is there anything else that we need to cover?
I don't think so.
You can always come back.
I would love to. Yeah, we could talk about something else. But yeah, we were kind of all over the place, but I think it was, for me, it was very, very satisfying intellectually. It's nice to meet people. And Mike.
Being a space
Well, that's one
ambassador.
thing. But just, I'm talking about being, talking to other smart people who really love learning. The people I work with, the teachers, are like that. They're all they're not your typical educators.
Yeah.
And there's something about Thales, I think, that attracts people like that.
Like a moon to a planet, perhaps?
Perhaps, yeah. Yeah, hopefully not like an asteroid to a planet. Yeah, that would be bad.
Maybe one of the gas giants, but hopefully not Earth.
Yeah, it's so it's been, like I go to work, I have to wake up at 4 o'clock every day, and I'm a night owl. Go to bed at like 9 now, which I made it to my 60s before I had to, adult.
Yeah.
This is what they say now. But I drive to work, I can't wait. I can't believe that there's a place like Thales and that I can be a part of it and hopefully be part of shaping it. It's exactly what people need. It was the education that I did not get. I think the closest Catholic school was 40 miles away where I grew up, and my mom didn't drive. It's like an oasis in this in this crazy culture of ours. It's a good place to be. I think that the students would agree if they realized how good they have it, which I remind them all the time, right? Your parents love you so much that they're paying taxes for your education, and then they're paying again for Thales.
2 times over.
They love you, You should thank them. It's a privilege. I wish that I have 2 daughters in college. One just graduated college, one's in college. If I had known about Thales, I would have definitely sent them there.
Well, this is a huge endorsement, especially coming from you. We're really thankful to have you on staff. Have been since the first day I met you. I remember
that. Yeah.
Meeting you, getting walking through like, hey, these are the books you got to read, and you're just like, yes, please.
We have to teach The Hobbit. I get to teach Shakespeare. Yeah. But do you remember what you told me? Like the last parting words, like you mentored me for 2 days, and then you said, but you got to get everything into Canvas. And I said, what's Canvas? I don't know. And then you turn around while you're walking out the door. Sink or swim. Remember that?
I hope I didn't. That's terrible part.
Oh no, it was great. That's what I think more people need to hear that.
Well, you need 2 things to be a good teacher. You need content knowledge and you need patience. Yeah. You need a head full.
I think enthusiasm too, though.
Yeah, right? Enthusiasm. Yeah. I feel like that might just be the flip side of patience, but you have to have those amazing stories to like captivate students' attention. Yeah. You got to have patience with yourself to like learn a new system, learn the students' names. You got to have patience with the students, just remembering.
Right, you have to understand that they're growing.
Yeah, they're baby stars.
I see them every day. And it's not till I see them outside the context of school I realize they're 10, 11, 12 years old. These are little kids. Because when you see them every day,
you kind of forget that.
Yeah, you forget. You think that you're their peers, right? Because you don't see yourself when you have memories. You're not in your own memories, right? Everybody else that's around you is, right? It's like you're taking the photograph, so you're not in it. But I saw 2 of my students out one night, kind of a random place. I realized they're babies. You know, I need to cut them more slack,
Yeah.
which I never did. But you know, you have to understand that the whole thing is an iterative process, right? We are taking them from, you know, larval stage and slowly bringing them to the point where they need to go, and giving them, it's not just the content that's in here, it's helping them develop their character.
Yeah,
right?
forming that.
Yeah,
right.
and good, you know, the habits that we're teaching them are going to serve them well in college, certainly on their job, you know, as an adult, right? So we're setting them up for success, whether they realize it or not.
Yeah.
And I think that Thales is a blessing. So it's a great place to be. It was kind of a spur of the moment decision, but I tend to go with hunches like that, and this one really, really paid off.
Yeah.
So I do carpool every morning, and I'm happy to be there.
Well, that's a
It's
huge.
just really weird, but
Sometimes it can be pretty cold.
yeah. Santa brought me a vest that has a battery, and it's heated, so I haven't really suffered this winter.
That's good. Well, stay warm, Mark.
Yes, sir.
Mark, thank you so much for
Always
being
a pleasure.
on Developing Classical
sir.
Thinkers again. And thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you're interested in the unique brand of classical education that we have here at Thales Academy, please be sure to check us out at our website at www.thalesacademy.org. And until next time, for Developing Classical Thinkers, I'm Winston Brady. Stay classy and stay classical.